Ozzy releasing Patient Number 9, 2022. 2023 comes along, and Ozzy is announcing every tour known to man between 2023 and 2024. Swearing to God, he is back. He is getting back into shape. Of course, he's been suffering from a multitude of medical problems, MS being only one of them, right? And so we don't know if that's part of the problem, if that's what finally claimed Ozzy in the end or not. We haven't gotten any kind of diagnosis on cause of death or anything like that. So that's going to be down the line. And I can guarantee we'll start seeing articles, Ozzy's last words and all of this. And I don't want to get that maudlin, but there is a story here, at the beginning, of the end of a certain rock star's life. He released an album. It was his 13th album, and it was called Patient Number 9. All right. And we've talked about what came out of that. We talked about what followed. And Ozzy kept making these statements, and for the most part, it was usually Sharon, his wife, Sharon, who poo-pooed the idea, right? And said, oh, no. And he goes, well, one more tour. And she said, no, you can't do that. You're not able to do it. Well, one more group of shows. No, Ozzy, you can't do that. One more show? Well, okay. We've covered this 1,000 times. But with his passing so soon after, you kind of got to wonder at this point, was his condition always a lot worse than even we were led to believe? Maybe that's why, because Sharon was never shy in promoting Ozzy in any way, and yet she was putting her foot down. There's no doubt Sharon loved Ozzy, right? They seem to be a couple in love, a love for the ages, as they say, right? And all along, it really got down to this, that Ozzy, that's the one thing about him. I've said this before. The man absolutely adored his audience, and he adored performing. It was what he lived for. It was his breath. It was his reason to exist, notwithstanding being in love with Sharon. This is what fed him air into his lungs. This is what gave him the will to continue. And then you got to think also of how insistent Sharon got in, every interview she did, interviews she planned ahead to do nothing more than to talk about Ozzy Osbourne as a solo artist should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And she yacked and yacked for a good 8 months before the inductions came out, and it worked. Okay. Now, I've criticized her and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but if there's anybody on this planet that should get a second nod into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as a solo artist, it's certainly Ozzy. Ozzy's solo career, by many standards, was more successful than Black Sabbath's career, and especially for the money that the original members made out of that first incarnation. Ozzy made a ton more money being on as a solo artist, but his greatness, to me, was always when he was with Black Sabbath. All right. Like I said, I didn't collect, although I am now, Ozzy Osbourne solo albums in the past. I never turned off his songs. You hear Crazy Train. Not only do you not turn the radio off, you turn it up. Right? Crank it out. Mama, I'm coming home. Mr. Crawley, man, all that stuff. Yeah, crank that stuff up. I just didn't actually go out and buy the albums. And it was mainly because of a little snobbery with me. It's like, oh, yes, well, that's not Black Sabbath. And I was just as critical of Ronnie James Dio taking his spot. For me, Black Sabbath was the 4 original members. Even after that show and Ozzy making a big deal, I can't do this again and everything, he was still saying he was going to make new music. That's why I say there may be some recordings that they'll have to, put together. And if he was that ill, I can guarantee you his vocals were probably the first thing they slapped over a basic rhythm track, and they just got to flesh the rest of the stuff out. I predict we'll see a new Ozzy Osbourne album, one way or another, relatively soon. Probably right around the time or just before this movie comes out next year. Maybe even sooner. So we get up to this point. He gets to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He can't perform at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. He sits on this throne, and he's very shaky. He doesn't look good, right? And this was 8 months before the final Black Sabbath show. I remember at the time, Royce and I were talking about it right after that came out, and I said, I don't know. I don't see how he could do a final Black Sabbath show. He can't even sing from a throne at the Rock and Roll. I mean, all he had to do was open his mouth. And now looking back on that, you kind of got to go, well, there was a reason he wasn't opening his mouth. He was sicker than he was letting us on to believe, I think, when you think about all of this. All right. But still, he had 8 months to go. Right. And so I thought heavy rehabilitation. He talked about having trainers and rehabilitation. And yet every time you would see him walk, he was hunched over. He was in a wheelchair, not looking good at all. And that was why I said, I don't know. Will this guy even show up? We were tossing the fates to the wind on Royce just days before, or a day before this show started, right? I said that at the time. I'm going to call it. I think he's going to do. He'll be there. I think he's going to perform. How well, I'm not going to say, but I think he'll perform. When I made that prediction, inside my head goes, oh man, you might be setting yourself to eat a lot of freaking crow, Michael Noland, because I wasn't that sure he could do it, right? And he did it. He performed material not only from his solo career, but with Black Sabbath. At the time, I felt like the set was too short. And if he couldn't have gone another song, I felt that they should have shortened his solo career, because I'm a Black Sabbath fan primarily, and they were the head billing. They should have gotten that one. I wanted Black Sabbath, the song, right? That was my way of getting it. But now looking back on it, wow. What did this show take out of him? Now think about this. This is a man who knows how sick he is. I think looking back on all of these events I just mentioned, photos of him, the urgency of Sharon getting him into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. It had to be this year, got to get it done, because that leads to this year, right? And there's a sense of urgency to the story to me. There's a sense of almost gloom and doom to the story. And yet, it's a story of triumph, in a way. Also, if you think about it, Ozzy was bound to determine to be the cowboy that he was, and to die with his boots on. And the speed from which he passed away from that show practically says that to me. Okay? I think the show did take it out of him. I think there was real concern, at least, that this show could do him in. Because it seems like that's exactly what it did. A mere 2 weeks and 1 day, 15 days after that show, he passes away. Right. And yet I think, It brings a smile to my face every time I think of Ozzy almost getting out of that chair. Did you see it? Did you see it? He'd be singing away and just about ready to get up and realize I can't walk. And he's back doing this, right? He lived to perform.